Welcome back to Navigating Carbon, your compass to carbon management. As always, I'm your host, Deb Ryan, and in this episode, I was joined by David Reid. David is the Chief Marketing Officer as well as the Chief Technology Officer at NOV. NOV is a company that is one of the main providers of technology and equipment to all parts of the energy industry. David provides really thoughtful insight on how NOV and all of us at large can really embrace the idea of having an and conversation around energy. We also discuss how he and NOV approach innovation and technology development, as well as adoption across all sectors of the energy industry. If you enjoy our episode, please make sure you like it. And as always, if you would like to stay on top of all that is happening at Navigating Carbon, please make sure you subscribe. But for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with David. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Navigating Carbon. Today, I'm joined by David Reid. David, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
It's
How are
so
you?
I'm doing really well as well. It's so great to see you. I'm excited to talk to you today about NOV and what NOV is doing in the energy transition space. But for the folks listening, can you start with talking about who NOV is and a little bit of the evolution of NOV on the energy transition journey that you've been on?
Okay. We've been a oil and gas primarily company. Our names are very strong. The N, O, and V have associated brand names that are really well known in oil and gas, and probably why we, not probably exactly why we changed it, was we were moving into other fields, and we were probably an industrial first for quite a long time, and we're a highly acquisitive company. We're mostly manufacturing. We do service. But I would say manufacturing and design and invention is kind of the engine that has worked for us. And that runs from singular products up to massive integrated systems. And we all started from small companies. And so the culture of this giant corporation, it's about an $8 billion corporation, is very small company. So we're particularly odd that way. Everybody inside the company grew from a shop floor or out in service or doing something else, and so there's a common language, and it's kind of an earthy kind of group. So yeah, we the energy transition thing. I think when we transferred over to NOV, which is a decade ago now, with my boss, I kind of suggested that we had three segments at the time, and I suggested a fourth that was industrial and renewables. And he said, no, never. We're not going to do that. And I knew we were anyway, so I just started that journey. So it took a number of years before he realized, thinking we were, oh no, we're behind. And we weren't. We'd just done an assessment of around 20 different renewables or energy transition type businesses, probably mostly renewables. And we already had a natural leaning that way that was happening in the company. So there was, particularly out of Europe, because they became the most aware earlier. But really, from my perspective, it was a business thing. I was like, there's growth and opportunity, and the growth was fantastic. What's awkward for us is there's a lot of government money, and that definitely swayed us to we weren't too excited about government money because it changes with administrations, and we'd bought a company that had a wind tower business in California, and legislation changed, and suddenly the business collapsed. 2 years later, legislation that came back, and the business was good, but we were already out. We're like, we're not going to play these games. So we were used to a lot more, even though it's cyclical in oil and gas. It's not a wild mood change every 4 years. So that was kind of our general disposition. Early on, we had a lot of excitement. I think the first time I did a gathering to talk about where we go in this energy transition, I think I allowed 30 people in a room. We wanted 100. I mean, there was 100 who really wanted to be there and wanted to talk about it. There was a lot of passionate people. And we love this passionate, dispassionate thing, which works well. So when we acquire businesses, it comes from inside the company. Someone says, I think we should buy this company. And they're very passionate about it. And then the people who do the deal are very dispassionate. And they just look at it from a business side, and they can take it or leave it. And that's really important for buying good business, because when you're emotionally buying, you don't really do fair assessment. So that third party thinking is in the gut of us. So we realized if we let our natural tendencies go, which are business leaning, we're very operational. I'm kind of the crazy guy who wants all the different stuff. But most of the people are designed to operate and execute. And we knew if we just said, we'd like you to look at this, they'd say no, because in the short term it looks awful. And I had lots of questions around the business side, lots of questions that not about could we make money, but more around in the bigger picture, who's making money. And those aren't very attractive pictures. And so I kept having to tell people, yes, I see that you're concerned over the methods that people can make money in this space, but they are going to do it. So my question is, do you want the business? So that's really the journey we went on. And so what we created inside the company was to avoid the killing of businesses, which would have happened very quickly. We put in the bonus scheme of the leadership team and of everybody in the company that if you do energy transition things, you will receive a bonus. And we did that for 2 years. In fact, it almost confused the company that we were an energy transition company. I think I had someone in R&D reached out to me and said, I had to take them aside actually and go, listen, I know you think we're an energy transition company, but we're not. We're a business. And that was, she was like, oh my goodness, I've been lining up things. I said, I know you can think it's good for the environment, it's good for employees and all those things. But if there's no business there, it's not going to last.
This doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So we very much make money in this space, which I think differentiates us from most. Most people, go out of business in a lot of the renewable space, at least. And so strategically, we kind of developed a language for everybody that got them into kind of 3 buckets of thinking. And the first was taking our existing infrastructure of oil and gas and how can we just make it more efficient and reduce the carbon footprint, which people could understand it better that way as we're looking at efficiency and costs and, will it pay for itself? So a ton of work went into our existing infrastructure just to reduce the carbon footprint of oil and gas. And so that's an easy natural for us. A lot of businesses across the place. The middle space is probably the most fun, where we said, okay, where do we have technology and technique over here that actually fits in renewables? And so when you look at the way they install fixed wind right now offshore, it's with jackups. Well, guess what? We know jackups. So we're extremely successful in that space. We certainly have a majority share of design and componentry in jackup installation vessels. And then floating is the same. It's semi-submersible. So even though there's 140 people in floating wind with designs, most of them are either EPCs, which foundationally in oil and gas were the worst for high cost and low late delivery, because they sell engineering, which fundamentally is kind of the opposite of how we are. We're a product manufacturer, so we're taking gigantic systems and productizing them. So that's kind of the other people in the game are researching and developing floating systems. They haven't been building them for years, and so we actually have kind of risen to the top of that crowd because we productize and we built out the fleet of jackups and drill ships. And then in the far reach is the just new business. What can we go into as a manufacturer? And we played with a lot of things, especially in those 2 years. There was a lot of innovation, and sometimes we'd innovate, and the drive was always we had an R&D group doing this, and we just asked them, where can you take a cost and cut it in half, a majority cost of what's going on? And it was fascinating. We came across all sorts of things, great ideas. Some we killed because in solar we stopped doing it just because the business was so many players and so little money. Didn't matter if you could solve the problem. It just didn't add up. But wind towers, on land, the shocker for us was one of the big costs of wind towers is the cranes that go out there to assemble. We're all waiting on weather. So it turns out nobody had thought, you know what, it's kind of windy. And the most expensive thing that we rent can't operate at high winds. And as they were going higher, the problem was getting worse. And so
Yeah.
we designed a special crane that can work at high winds and not be shut down. And
Yeah.
simple little things like that, which were really easy for us because we made cranes, we had moving systems on land, so we developed
That
stuff. So
makes sense.
there's lots and lots of those stories. There's nothing we can't touch, so we're not. Sometimes our people think that, oh, are we allowed to do this? Like, we're allowed to do anything, just make money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way we said it. Then after 2 years, a lot of things fell off, and now we're kind of down at a good understanding of where can we make money.
I love that. And I love the journey of it as well in terms of how you think about this. And there's, to be honest, there's so much to unpack with what you started with. I want to actually, because you wear two hats at NOV. You're the chief marketing officer as well as the chief technology officer. So I want to sort of start with that storytelling marketing bit sort of initially. And I know one of the things that, both you and I are traditionally from the oil and gas industry, and this narrative around energy transition and this all or nothing kind of mentality of, well, you're in oil and gas and so that's bad, or you're in renewables and that's good. How do you tell that story both internally and externally, and how do you break that down?
Well, there's tension. There's a natural tension. It shouldn't be there. That's the reality. Is that there isn't, for us at least as NOV, we're a manufacturer. We make stuff. So you have to bring people to that level. Even in the leadership team, who traditionally oil and gas, and the margins are fantastic in oil and gas, and the margins are lesser in energy transition, and that's a reality. And so the question is, why are we doing it? And the answer to that is you just got to find value. If you can produce value, people will pay for it. But in the gut of people, there's definitely people who are resistant. It's politicized, so people like, which side are you on? And because I was pushing this, everyone was convinced that I was a wild Democrat, maybe socialist. There's just assumptions. I drive a Tesla. As soon as that happened, everyone's like, for sure you hate oil and gas. I'm like, I really love technology, is why I have a Tesla, but that's okay. But the people, it's just the society we're in, is they're projecting. And on the other side, I know my cousin works in renewables, and he is a wild socialist. He's like a political guy. He's worked in Britain for years, and I met his friends in the U.S. who are all socialists, and they're like, we can't believe it's a socialist oil and gas guy. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not. And my cousin's like, no, he's definitely not. You've seen his house, But it's this. Everyone's projecting the opposite, or it's a weird. Most people who are more on the Democrat side are assuming that I'm a Republican, and it's all. That's the core problem. Is everyone is seeing it as a polarizing subject, and energy shouldn't be a polarizing subject. In fact, when I'm on a lobby board for offshore called NOIA, and we go up to DC, and when I talk to people, my natural angst comes out, which isn't good. So the lobbyists are like, can you calm down? You're offending people. But they assume I'm against them and their party, and I'm like, I'm not. I think energy is a people issue, and I think you have to see it that way. You have to stop using it to beat each other up and think about, how do we solve this for people? And so I think it's getting it into that space. How do you get people on board? And it basically breaks by demographics. The older folks who've been here a long time feel like you're insulting them because they feel like they changed the world, which they did. We allowed the world to have energy and to move and improve and all that stuff that happened that's good for all of us, that gave us the society we have. They think you're insulting that and saying you're terrible, you're bad people. And there are people who say that oil and gas is bad, and so they're assuming everybody who's interested in anything else is saying that. And I don't think anyone's saying that. There are people who say that, but not reasonable people. And most people are really in the middle. They're not really in the extremes. If it wasn't for social media pushing them out to the extremes, I think most people actually are in the middle. And the answer to our societies is having balance. So I think it's more getting everyone onto that page and putting it into language that they can understand. And then, of course, the younger generation, they all are worried about what's next. What are we doing to the planet? Neither side wants to hurt the planet.
No.
They just don't. That's the assumption you're projecting. There's just a group over here who are worried about the costs, and there's a group over here who are worried about the planet, and both worry about the exact same thing. And they just choose to talk about one of those subjects. So it's really getting everyone on that same page of it's good for business. And when you get into that, I mean, the core of our company is built on the moral case for supporting people, our families, getting jobs, building businesses that support people. And as long as you're morally focused on, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to create value so that our families can live well. And if you see that as a moral driver, then you're going to do good business things.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's always something, you and I have always sort of talked about that culture building and some of that kind of stuff. And I think you've managed to do that within NOV. And it's like, how do we spread that love externally as well in terms of, I like the framing of that in terms of the common ground and figuring out how we solve these very difficult problems together and not against each other, even though because we're all sort of aiming for the same thing. So let's switch to the technology piece. You mentioned already you love technology and technology development and stuff. And you talked already a little bit about some of the evolution of NOV, but as the chief technology officer, how do you focus where you're going to put that technology development and how that's going to evolve and things like that?
Focus is a hard word with what we do. We have a lot. I'm good at not being that focused, which is probably why I have the job.
That's probably helpful.
We have 18 different business units with underneath them multiple business units. So it's a very complex system, and now we split that into two. For me, it's more, my job is to stimulate the businesses to jump in. For example, I don't, other than data science, I don't make stuff. And for years we had people in the job that I had, and they would make products, they would compete with the other parts of the business. Now, nobody called it compete at a corporate level, but everyone in the business saw it that way. Yeah. So it was going to die. They were going to make sure that whatever invention came out of a corporate group, it was going to die. And it's just human behavior. So for me, what I do is spend a lot of time with the business unit leaders and with the engineering teams and with our two segment leaders and try and ask, what do you need? Where can I help you? And when they say, well, we'd like you to do 5 to 10 year type work, I'll say, great, but I'm not going to build a staff for that, which actually they like because they pay my bills. So they don't like it when you're building up staff. And so with the renewables group, we actually took them out of our rig group, just some great inventors, and stuck them in a different area and just said, have at it, invent anything. We gave them freedom and said, because one of the problems that we've learned with startups is you have an idea, you convince some people to invest in it, now you're in. You're going to spend years making sure that either works or gets sold. We don't like that environment because it causes you to not kill things as fast as you should. And so these guys had a job to break things. That was their number one thing is you if you keep trying to break things, have ideas and try and destroy them. And every now and again they go, we can't kill this one. It seems like it's going to live. And then they were already inside a business. We would bring in manufacturing and engineering from the actual business and kind of hand over in that process. That way new ideas live. So I'm always looking, it's not that that's a rule we play everywhere, it's just I'm always looking for solutions that can work in a company where when you're our size, 35,000 people, it's not normal to innovate. It's normal to just operate yourself into death. It's a slow, and oil and gas has traditionally been a slow death, so you have to watch it because no one thinks they're in a process of degradation.
And with how you're letting the teams kind of go about that innovation and stuff like that, it allows, something I think that we're always not great about, particularly in the oil and gas space, because there's things like safety concerns and stuff like that, is the idea of failure. And so by thinking about it almost from a failure initially, that, is that kind of, that's that sort of culture you're trying to develop? Is that kind of the intention of that fast failure, learn quickly, move on kind of thing?
Well, and it's I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I think it's a way that we've been going. It's been trying to create environments. You can't help how you can say it like I just said it, And that group was particularly good at bringing up things and killing them, and being able to do multiple things was part of their world. Most people, it's the opposite. Once you have an idea, you love it so much, you'll do anything to make it live, and you don't even know you're doing it. That your business case died a long time ago, but you're still keeping it alive. So it's not simple for sure to get people to start just trying stuff. So you have to have. I mean, we had a literal playground. It was full of 3D printers, and like you're out in the countryside, there was cows outside. It was just, we didn't even build the building. It was unfinished. It was just a bunch of desks with no walls, and they would just move around, and there was tons of little machine tools and stuff they could get done. And most of their buying was through Amazon, which is against our corporate behavior. You're not qualifying your supply chain, and they were doing a lot of kind of risky out there things. But we had to allow it to try it as a model, and certainly allowed us to play around in the space. So I'm always thinking of that. We're working a bit with startups right now in a way that we think can work, because we would never buy a startup. It's not natural for us, because the startup investing game is like saying, making money, the best way is to go to Vegas. Yeah, it's just that there's just so many players who don't succeed in that space. And so we got into, we realized with startups we were supporting programs and giving them money, but that wasn't solving what we needed solved. That wasn't helping, because it enables, if you give too much money to startups, it allows them to stay alive when they should naturally die. So we went to, we realized, because we're really, really good at buying companies, we're really good at assessing them and their value, and almost everything we bought has grown, not everything, but almost a lot of cases compared to other companies. So our buying behavior is really good, our assessment is good, and so we thought that's really valuable for startups. So we started to offer a competition, basically, and a coaching thing where people come in and then they drop out based on performance, and allows them to come in, and they get to a certain point. Now, we don't want to own, which is most venture people are like, wait a minute, you're not going to own part of the company? No, we don't want to. We might be their partner, which we offer, and we do have an option to buy if we want, which is unlikely. But we're getting them developed. We're paying for some testing to happen, and then we're done, and then you're off on your own. So it's new, but it seems to be working quite well. I was really surprised. I think we were at maybe 13 or 14 contestants at the point I did one-on-ones with them. And they were all really good. Now already they're down to 11, I think, and we're continuing down that path of elimination. But it seems to be working, and that's the beauty of MySpace, is I get to, not the old website that you used to have, MySpace, but MySpace.
I remember that.
Yeah, so I get to play around, and I have a lot of trust in my job and what I do. I've been in the company 33 years actually. Just hitting another one, but there's a ton of trust, and that's part of the company.
Yeah. One of the things with what you're talking about in terms of how you're like looking at not just this kind of test with the startups, but also just how you're innovating and driving technology, is one of the gaps that I think we've seen in this space is that, there's all these really good ideas and maybe some not so good ideas.
Bad ideas.
Yeah, some bad ideas. But like, one of the things that I feel like NOV has the capacity to do is this like scaling and adoption piece, which seems to be a bit of a challenge in the middle for companies. And like, are you seeing that through this process, both with some of these startups and the idea of the teams really trying to break things and seeing what's going to work? Then NOV really has the capacity to scale, and that seems like it's missing. Like, are you seeing it?
It is, and I think everyone we talk to, in theory, the hard part is we say this in theory, like, we could take your technology and we could scale it up.
Yeah.
And then they go, well, good, here's our technologies. And then we just go, are you crazy? So most people buying and selecting don't do what we do. They don't do that scaling. They don't have the business model agility that we have. We don't write long papers or do PowerPoints to each other. There's none of that. We're all gut business people who understand. Show me really simply what you're talking about. If it makes sense to me, I'm in. And then we have people who will dig into the weeds of it. We had one case that was really good example. It was a startup. So like we've said, not our usual thing to work with startups. But they had an idea to build tall towers in the US where you send the manufacturing plant to the field and it bends the steel and it welds it and builds the tower. Well, now that wouldn't be a business case if it wasn't for the low-cost towers coming from China into Long Beach. As you get taller, they can't get under the bridges. The size of the tubes can't make it through. And so the economics don't work. So suddenly we have a more economical model to build in country. So we liked it so much, we said, all right, we think this is a real thing. We'll give you one of our manufacturing plants, and let's get this thing going. And so we took maybe 30% of the company with a goal to take 60%, I think, or something over 50 later on. We got them about 100 orders with GE because now you have our name associated. And then welding problems happened. And welding problems happened because they were a startup. We're experts at this stuff, but they were just working it out, kind of like I was saying about floating wind. You got tons of companies doing things for the first time, and they don't know the history of how to avoid certain things. So when they were going well and we had sold before we had the welding issue, we said, okay, we feel like we're on the right ramp. We would like to take a larger position. And they said no. Our valuation's much higher now. Of course, in renewables, people over-evaluate all the time, which is the opposite of what we like to do. And we were like, oh, this is bad. Maybe we'll never do this again, because we can't be in this position where they're not doing the right thing. But it was legal. It just was an agreement that we had. So, and then they started failing with welding. We sent in our people to try and help them, and they were collapsing the business so fast. With existing commitments that they eventually said, please take it off our hands because this looks like a disaster. And we took it off their hands, put all of our people in, solved the welding problems, and now it's a fantastic business that we're running. Yeah. But that was a really good case of who can say take a manufacturing plant as well as then jump in and take over and make manufacturing and scaling work. Yeah, it's not an easy thing. Even when we mostly buy small companies. We buy probably on average one a month. But some years better than others and some more intense than others. So it's not like a rule. But when we see a lot of small acquisitions, we can put them into the world like tomorrow, the day after we bought them. And so we advise them to take it slow. And that's because that assumption that you suddenly can ramp is not healthy. Will do damage to your business. So pick your market, pick your margins, go in there and slowly build up your business at a healthy rate so that you don't break it on the way. So sometimes it's that experience that can be really helpful. But yeah, it's really hard because I'm describing our company uniquely, and then how does that help anybody else? I don't know. So it's interesting, but I'm always trying to think, how could a listener learn? And, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's okay. I think it's a really, again, we sort of talked about this at the top. It's going to take an all approach to some of this stuff, right? And so, whether it's, other kind of groups, and I had someone from NREL, Sarah Dodowski, talking about how they're supporting small companies, the way you guys are thinking about technology adoption. Like, it's going to take so many different avenues and funding and ideas and people. And again, some of that training and mentoring that you were talking about for entrepreneurs and things coming into this space who, again, maybe don't understand oil and gas or, or have oil and gas experience and are looking to transition that and things like that. So it is this exciting end kind of conversation.
And I mean, when we started, I think my first speech to all of the startups was like, if we can kill you, you want us to kill you. And that's really hard for someone here because they 100% believe they're going to be successful. But that desire to get on and do something else if it's not going to work is much better sooner, and it's one of the venture capital problems is they're prolonging. In fact, DOE, I've had long conversations with. I went to their floating wind investment meeting just because we were talking in general. It was my first time talking with DOE. It's a while ago now, but I said afterwards, all of these would never have made it past day one, and you're funding them and keeping them alive, and now they're annoying us to say we should be investing, and it's really bad for the system that your poor base business thinking isn't functioning for some reason in the middle of this. We really need good business logic because we want to be investing in things that can make a difference, not things that are. The economics just don't stand in a really basic, fundamental way. And so that's that's what I mean with those conversations. If you can get people to here's why it won't work. And I've been that person. I've sat with oil company people who've said this will never work because of this. Your choices are go fix this or stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, that fail fast mentality, and particularly in such a big company like NOV, I think is really unique that you guys have still got that, like I said, that sort of small culture kind of attitude and things like that. So like, I know we're running up against time, but I'm really curious from you as we like close out, like what's really what's exciting you, kind of like, what are you really excited about in this space as we kind of get to the end of our conversation?
I want floating wind to happen, and it's a really bad economic situation. But I do. I'm trying to get the UK to make a step, and I think they're going to, and because I think we need to step into it, especially high wind environments and the ability, particularly North Sea, and what they can generate is pretty interesting. I'm loving geothermal right now. I did a ton of R&D on a theory that didn't work. It cost us a fortune. Drilled a bunch of wells. We didn't tell anybody, so not so embarrassing. But we did do a lot of work trying to prove a theory, and we couldn't, which is okay. And so then we kind of, but in the process, that's kind of in our secret world, and in the open world, we were doing some simple things. We started with a government group looking at high temperature sensors, and everything in our gut was like, "Oh, this is going the wrong way. This is high cost." And someone just said, "Why don't we just make it really cold down there?" And we got down this really efficient cooling systems. How do we do tuboscope? We do coatings that are meant to preserve the pipe, but of course they have a thermal value. We started bumping up the thermal value on the coatings. We started looking down at we did look at BHA components and can we really get them thermally protected, but there's a cost benefit and volume issue there. So we have some technology. We're maybe not going to do it. We're kind of on the fence there. And then of course drill bits was easy. They were trying to save money. We love the renewable space because they're always trying to take the cost out and never thinking technology. So our first, let's design particularly high temperature drill bits. I think they were so resistant to the price that the first time they tried it, I don't know if it was a freebie or a bargain, but it was 60% faster immediately. And of course they can't afford not to be doing this. They finally got to that. And then repackaging smart electronics to work in cold temperatures. And also the benefit of cold fluid hitting hot rock was just being really another plus, So it's we're seeing liners, fiberglass liners. So all of that, little secret, we're one of the largest fiberglass companies in the world. So people don't understand that. But so fiberglass liners are really good, nice product for us. So that's been really fun that we've been doing a lot there. And then nuclear. We've been playing around in nuclear, micronuclear stuff. So that's just because some people went, can't we do this? We're like, go do it. So
see if it works. Yeah.
If you look up Shepherd Power, those guys are trying to bring nuclear actually into oil and gas as a low cost energy provider.
Very cool. Well, with that, David Reid, thank you so much. It's, as always, such a thoughtful and interesting conversation. I could chat to you for hours, but thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.